Hi, this is Peter Lohman. I'm the founder and CEO of RL Property Management. We're here on episode 4 of our series on how to pick a property management company. Today, we're going to discuss how to call your top 5 property management companies, learn a little bit more about them, what questions you should be asking those companies, and how to narrow down the list and select your top few companies for the next step. So the first thing you want to do is take the list that you generated in the previous step, and if you haven't seen that, you can go watch the previous video, and assemble their contact information. You're going to want phone numbers specifically for your top 5 management companies from the previous step, because you're going to actually want to have a conversation with someone at each of these companies. So the next step is prepare a list of questions that you want to ask of these companies. What information are you trying to gather from these companies? There's some common questions that you're certainly going to want to ask about, like what are your fees? How do you handle lease renewals? What is the maintenance process like? Some of the questions you may have answered yourself on their website. That's okay. It's actually good to just ask again and see if their answer is consistent with what's written on their website, and just as a refresher for yourself. The other thing is sometimes the exact questions aren't important. It's more the process of talking with someone at that company, getting a feel for them, and just getting comfortable with who they are and what they're doing. You can learn a lot by somebody and by a company just by having a conversation with them. It almost doesn't even matter what the topic is. So make sure you call these companies during business hours. You can try reaching them after hours or on weekends. It's pretty unlikely that you're going to get a call back in my experience. Property management companies have emergencies that do come up on nights and weekends, and they have folks that are on call for those emergencies. But many property management companies won't be answering their main office phone lines during nights and weekends. So try them during business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and see if you're able to reach someone at that time. I would disqualify any company that doesn't call you back within about 1 business day. So if you call on a Monday morning, if you haven't heard anything back by Tuesday around lunchtime, that's not a great sign. I would probably say that company is disorganized or isn't prioritizing new clients right now. And whatever the reason, it's unlikely they're going to be a great fit or a good option for you. That said, if you call at 4 p.m. on a Friday, if someone doesn't get back to you until Monday morning, I wouldn't necessarily hold that against them. Again, property management companies have true emergencies that come up, and in the scale of things, a new prospective client may not rank at the very top of the list of their emergencies that they want to deal with on the weekend. So give them a little bit of slack. I know it can be frustrating when you're waiting for answers, but the reality in this business is you're being pulled in a million different directions, and sometimes it can take a day to call somebody back. When you do reach somebody on the phone, take your time. Don't just rush through your list of questions and focus on getting the exact answers to those questions. Again, like I said earlier, you're trying to feel them out a little bit here. It's kind of like a first date. Try and get a sense for how they operate. The person that you're talking to on the phone, who is it? How do they fit into the hierarchy? Do they sound rushed? Do they sound like they care about new business at all? Do they have a process for handling calls from new clients or prospective clients? If you kind of feel like they're just surprised by the whole thing, really unprepared, they're just surprised at the questions you're asking. Again, that could be sort of an older family company that doesn't specialize in third-party management. You're going to want to work with a company where you can tell they get a lot of these calls. They're used to answering questions. They're not put off or offended or confused when you're asking detailed questions about what it would be like for them to manage your property. So while you're on the phone, one of the things you should be asking is what they need to get started. So a property management company typically needs a lot of things from you, the property owner, in order to get started managing your property. This is going to be things like keys, If the property is occupied, obviously the existing lease, the security deposit typically, usually there's some initial funds that are needed to start your account with the new company. There might be a setup fee, there's probably going to be a contract, there might be some documents you have to sign. So get a list from the company as far as what they're going to need. You're going to find it's probably going to be similar between companies, and start gathering up those items because you are getting near the end of this process. I would ask on the phone for a sample property management agreement. Some people call it a PMA for short. A property management company that's interested in growing their company and bringing you on as a client should be willing to send you a contract without too much trouble. We're, here at RL Property Management, we're happy to send those out when folks are curious, what the final document is that they would be signing. So, and when you're asking for that property management agreement, you may also ask for things like a standard lease. That's another one that we get a lot. Or if there's any other documentation or information that they send to new clients, that's probably going to be something that you can review as you're narrowing down your list. I would ask for some data points from all these management companies. Things like their average rent, their average occupancy length, or another way of asking that would be, what's your lease renewal rate? How many of those tenants that you place are sticking around? That's actually a really important one because turnover is the most expensive and destructive part of owning rental property. So you really want to get a feel for if this company has their pulse on the market and is paying attention to their customer needs, meaning the tenants. That's going to be reflected in the renewal rates. If tenants are generally happy with the properties and happy with the management company, they tend to renew their leases more often. For multifamily properties, the nationwide average is around a 50% lease renewal rate. For single families, that's going to be more like 60% or higher. So bear that in mind. And some property management companies may not have this data right at the tip of their fingers, but it's something they should be able to look into and get back to you on. Something you'll probably want to go into detail on is maintenance. How is maintenance handled when a tenant calls in with a maintenance request? What is their process? How do they prioritize these maintenance requests? How are they ensuring that your dollars are being spent in a conscientious manner? How do they prevent callbacks, and are property owners paying for items that are actually tenant responsibilities? So these are some of the examples where you can spend a little bit of time, get down into the details, in the weeds with whoever you're talking with, and get a feel for how their process is operating. Again, the exact details of how any individual company works aren't necessarily that important. Presumably they know better than you about how to handle a maintenance request, since that's their business. But the main idea is to just, in the process of exploring some of these topics with them, you're going to get a feel for the company. You're going to get an understanding if they have a custom process. Are the maintenance requests handled by Susie, who goes on vacation for 2 weeks every summer, or are they handled by a dedicated maintenance department where someone is always available? There's a big difference there, and you may have a preference on one or another. So with all that in mind, go ahead and document your top 5 properties, get their phone numbers, and give them a call and find out what they have to say. Once you've spoken with all 5 of those companies, you're probably going to have a pretty good sense of who you want to go with. I recommend narrowing that down to your top 2 choices. And in the next and final video in this installment, or in this series, we're going to discuss how to meet with your top 1 or 2 choices and finalize and select who you'd like to manage your properties, and how to kick off the whole process and hand over your property to them to start managing. So I hope to see you next time, and happy landlording.